Hello, my name is Larissa. Today I'll be taking this Calico Critter and customizing it into my D&D Catfolk character named Fable. I have never done anything like this before, but I love Calico Critters and I like that people have made customizations to them, so I decided to make my own little custom figure of my D&D character. It is a fully flocked small figure with clothing with a Velcro back. I did use my illustrations for my character to plan out all the article clothings that I will need to be making for this character. We will be making all the pattern pieces for the main articles of clothing for this little figure. So I will be using this dress as a base for the tunic for my Catfolk character. I'm cutting out 2 of those and using a very low tack tape to act as my temporary seams to be able to use this paper pattern to take on and off the Calico Critter and make adjustments where they need to be. Now the biggest adjustments were definitely the armholes, as they needed to be big enough for the arms to fully rotate. Additionally, the neckline came down a little bit and the bottom of the dress came up a little bit because this wasn't a dress, it was a tunic, and I needed to show the shorts based on my illustration. Additionally, the front swing of the dress was a little too wide, so I did cut down the front and trimmed that and used clear tape to make a permanent seal adjustment to this dress so it could lay flat. Also, the masking tape I had used for the side seams for the top arm and the top of the arm and the below the arm, the top tape stayed, but the bottom one left open because that's the only room I had to do proper sewing, and I wanted to make less stress on myself. So this is how the tunic turned out full pattern wise. Now I took that pattern paper and make a copy of it on a piece of paper to figure out the next article of clothing, which is the cloak. The cloak is very organically made here, trying to figure out how the layering will work. After I made those final adjustments to the front and back, I made sure I named both of those pattern pieces so I knew what they were and didn't lose them. And additionally, there will be a third main article of clothing, which is her shorts, using a scrap piece of elastic. I used that to understand the circumference of the Calico Critter, put it in half, traced it on a piece of paper, and drew out the shorts. The shorts always have a little U shape, as they do in real life for patterns, and the bottom hem of the shorts were wide, as they will be cinched together to create the poofy pants look when I hand sew them to my Calico Critter. Again, make sure you label all your pattern pieces. In the next video, we'll be working on the physical article of clothing with materials. This is how the layering looks with all the different pattern pieces, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Hello, welcome back to part 2 of making my Calico Critter into my D&D character named Fable. In the last video, we made lots of patterns. Today we'll be making the cape and the tunic, which is the main enchilada of this cute little outfit she wears. I am cutting out 2 capes out of this cotton fabric that looks like wood grain. The wood grain does go one direction, so I cut it out 2 and then segmented them down the shoulder so they line up the wood grain with the points. Using my sewing machine, I did a straight stitch and then a zigzag stitch to reinforce. For the back side of the cape, I decided to go with this lightweight brown felt, cutting it fairly close to the line so it has some seam allowance, sewing it very gently with a straight stitch, and then trimming up the excess once again, turning it inside out with a dull needle and some very small scissors. The top edge I left open. Now I'm turning the edges into each other, lightly pinning them in place with a threaded brown matching thread. I am using a whip stitch to close the top edge of the cape. I did decide to go with some ornate pieces here, some gold embroidery floss and some leftover scrap lame ribbon. And on top of that, I do have 4 very small tassels that goes on Fable. So I'm making real tassels the way tassels are made. I'm using a piece of cardboard to help me here with some fishing line and that gold embroidery floss again, wrapping it around a couple times, tying it off, using some tape to hold it in place, and holding my fingers fairly firmly so it doesn't come undone, taping that closed with that low tack tape once again. Normally you would tie the top here, but I don't want it to come undone, so I'm using hot glue, cleaning up those edges, and then I want some ornate pieces on the very top of this tassel. So I went with those gold seed beads again, some glass beads, and some crystal beads. threading it through the corners of the cape, I am tying them off the top, then using that gold ribbon, using a whip stitch all the way around, and some more embroidery floss to make some like long stitch detailing onto the cape with some more gold seed beads. I really like the way this turned out all the way around, as this is the most ornate piece on her. And then now we are going to the tunic. This is a light blue cotton material. I am using the pattern we had made before, sewing up the side seams. I do know this fabric's a little thin, so I went with a light blue felt to reinforce that stitch. I only did a single line stitch, turned it inside out, and then did a top stitch. I am using some acrylic paint that I had mixed myself, some light blue and some dark blue for some stripes and some flowers. And I will be working on the waist belt a little bit later. You know, you saw a little bit of it, but it needs some work. But I really like the way this turned out, and the next video we'll be working on more details. I'll see you in part 3. Thanks! Hello, welcome to part 3 of turning my Calico Critter into my D&D character, Fable. Today we'll be making the shorts, the scarf, and the sash. Starting off the shorts, we'll be using the pattern we had made in the beginning of our journey, trace it out, and cut it out of the sage green fabric. We'll be doing the back seam first, only sewing halfway up with a straight stitch, another straight stitch around the U shape of the crotch, cut off the excess and turn it inside out. Trying it on the little figure, make sure everything looks good, and then using a dull embroidery needle to make sure the shorts are poofing, and they are. Trying it on with the tunic, make sure the layering looks really good, and it does, and we'll be putting that aside and do the final sewing at the very end of this project. Moving on to the scarf. The scarf is made out of 3 parts, a thin long tube, a shorter stumpier tube, and then a very thin piece of fabric. The thin tube will be made for the base of the neck as the main scarf bit. I did hand sew it and do a whip stitch all the way around and then tied it off. Then for the bow, do the little wide bit of fabric, did a whip stitch to finish it, tied it around the middle to scrunch it, use a very thin piece of fabric to wrap it around the middle of the bow, and then tied it off. I will be leaving this main part of the scarf aside and the bow separately until the very end of the project. It does look really good all together. Moving on, I thought I was done with all patterns. I was not. I needed to make a pattern for the sash here. I was testing out how the ruching scrunching would go around her waist with a piece of paper, and then once I was happy with the pattern, cut it out of this cotton fabric. I will be cutting out 2 of those, doing a straight stitch and then a zigzag stitch. I'll be using a little bit of an opening that I didn't sew to be able to turn this inside out. With the help of a chopstick, I did very gently turn this inside out, and then I will be doing a whip stitch with the needle and thread to close up the opening that I had left open to turn it inside out. Then we will be doing all the details on the little sash with acrylic paint and a very small paintbrush. These are cute little flowers and they turned out really nice. We're going to put that aside and let that dry. And for the edge of the scarf, it does have this like tassel scallop edge kind of thing. I found this scallop edging on some acrylic ribbon. It needed to be painted. Did more than a few coats of that out of pink acrylic. Then used hot glue to attach to the edge of the scarf. I did hand sew with the whip stitch on the sash here to make sure the ruching stays. The little brown waist belt you saw in the last video, it did need a thin coat of Mod Podge to keep the felt from falling apart. We did hand sew it here to the sash to make sure everything's together. Looks really good. In the next we'll do more details. See you soon. Hello, welcome to part 4, turning my Calico Critter into my D&D character, Fable. Today we'll be working on accessories, bracers, and the final repaint of my Calico Critter and turning it into Fable. We will be popping around making lots of details today. First, we're using this gold material to cut out this oval shape and paint the posh-shaped sigil that goes on her bracer. While that dries, I'm going to be painting this little charm here gold that'll be used for her waist belts later. Her other bracer on her right arm is made out of simple green felt and this pink fabric here. I'm just hand sewing the pink to the felt and putting that aside and doing the final attachment in the next video. The gold bracer needs to be done now. I'm using this very thin brassy gold floral wire to form around a Copic pen and then a chopstick to get the shape, and then using some hot glue I'll attach the sigil charm that we had made before, and there's the bracer. And that will be put aside. Moving on to the little waist sash, I needed more pink, so I used more of that dusty rose fabric to attach on the very bottom of the sash. So Moving on to the next thing, she wears these little booty anklets. I ended up changing the design a little bit from what the illustration is to physical form. I did use that Mod Podge in the back of the felt to reinforce it, and then using this very thin gold material again to add the little adornments on the boots. The final hand sewing we done again for the boots in the last video. Moving on to her necklace, she wears this little pearl necklace. For the character, some backstory with that. It's made up of these seed beads, the pearl charm, and then on the floral wire. She wears this waist belt that I designed her in, so I'm using this scrap chain that I had with the pendant here. This is what it will look like. Again, final attachment we done in the last video. And now hand painting Fable. I use an assortment of materials here: paintbrushes, sponges, water, really watered down acrylic. I did submerge spray the Calico Critter all in water, so the really watered down acrylic did move like watercolor across the Calico Critter to kind of make this watercolor effect, just like blushing look to it, so it really encapsulates the ragdoll look. I had to wait for her to dry completely to then make her really striking ragdoll markings around her face, but for the most part that is what she looks like. And I'll go back in with this watered down white and then pink to do the more details on her face and her ears and her little toe beans. This is a short-haired cat figure, so I did use a long yarn to fluff up and then wrap around her tail and a little bit of her ears. It's not quite the right color, but I do fix it later in the final video. But there she is. She's looking really cute together. In the last video, part 5 will be the final reveal, seeing Fable all together. And thank you so much for watching this journey. I will see you in the next video. Thank you. Hello and welcome to part 5, the final installment of turning my Calico Critter into my D&D character, Fable. Today we'll be doing lots of hand sewing, using the nifty tool of a toothpick to help items of clothing to fit in the seams and the bendy parts of all the Calico Critter. Here I'm using a whip stitch method with matching thread, needle and thread, and hand sewing the back seam, working around the tail. Once that's secure, I knot it off and trim it. Now I'll be working on the boots done in the same way. We're gonna trim off the access material here and make sure everything lines up nice and snug. Using the matching thread again, I am doing a whip stitch for both boots. And then moving on to the dress here, we'll be using the thought process of think smarter, not harder, and attach the capelet to the dress. I'm using a whip stitch all around the collar line, mostly because there's going to be a lot of adornments around her neck area, so this is going to save me stress in the long run. And then once that's done, I tie it off and trim it. Same thing with the gauntlet here. We're using a whip stitch method. And then the arm bracer on the other side is just wire fitted, so that could just slide on. And now we're using the whip stitch method once again with a matching thread all the way down the back side of the dress. Using my toothpick here to secure everything in place. And then the belt we already did in the last video, attached the waist belt to the waist sash. I am securing them together here and laying the waist scarf in a way where they would rest together and not cover up too much of the other designs. Once that's secure, I tie it off and trim it. The next scarf here in 2 parts, we're putting the scarf on first using the whip stitch again. Fable has 2 belts like we had mentioned in the previous video. This one's a wire belt with all the little beading adornments. With the little access bit of the wire, I'm leaving that hanging off so I'm able to attach the chain waist belt. So they're kind of like meeting at the same point. And then I use some needle nose pliers here to then bend it in place and secure the end of it. Now I'm using the wiring of the pearl necklace here and kind of finagling it between the cape and the dress. Once that's secured, I use the wire cutters again and roll that into place. Now the final adornment is the neck bow in the back of her neck, so I'm hand sewing that again with a whip stitch. And then the final piece is this cute little bow in the front. It was done with the little elastic trimming, and I'm gonna trim off the little ends there. I found this little bead and I thought it'd be pretty in the back side of her outfit. And this is the final look of Fable. She turned out really good. I'm very proud of the way she looked, lots of details. And yeah, thank you for going on this journey with me. My little trickster cleric, I love her very much. I loved playing her and hope that she has many, many more adventures in the future. Thanks for watching. Bye.